Good.
All right, Mr. Chair, we're live.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the March 4th meeting of the Revenue Subcommittee. We have a hard stop at 9:45. We got about half an hour, so we're going to get through what we can get through off the agenda, and what we can't get through, we will get to next week. So I'll try to start with bills that I think are going to be a little less controversial. So I'm going to be bouncing around in the list of bills a little bit. George should have emailed you this morning a copy of the amendments. I'll also remind, because we have a number of guests with us, please keep yourself on mute if you are not speaking. For those of you that are not legislators, we ask that you not speak unless you're specifically called on. Or so if you have something you want to share and you want to say, hey, I'd like to be called on, you can certainly use the raise hand function. Depending on time, I may or may not go to you, okay? So let's look first at some of the stuff that I think we have a lot of bills with amendments on today. Let's look first at HB 1211, Economic Development, Maryland TEDCO, Pre-Seed Development Builder Fund. This is Delegate Barnes's bill that we heard. It's part of the Speaker's racial equity agenda. George, correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially what it does is it ensures more funding for the Pre-Seed Builder Fund that TEDCO had already been.
That's correct. Generally, it's receiving $1 million a year, and this would increase that funding by $5 million, or it would up to $5 million in 2023, 6.2 in 24, and then $7.5 million in future years.
And I have not received any amendments on that bill. So any discussion? Or questions or a motion?
Move favorable. Second.
Julian, you got beat out both times there just by like a hair. All right, so there's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the bill? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so 1211. Let's look next at the chair's bill, HB 1086. This is the bill, we had done some work on it in the interim. It makes some adjustments to the Tax Credit Evaluation Act, the process we use internally in the legislature to evaluate tax credits. The top line is it would get rid of the Joint Committee on Tax Credit Evaluation that has been essentially defunct for a couple years now, and sort of try to strengthen the process through the DLS side, potentially expand the scope, allow DLS to look at additional types of tax expenditures. I believe there is an amendment, George, if you would like to describe that amendment.
Mr. Chair, the amendment would strike portions of the bill that would have prohibited a unit state government required to administer certain tax credits from issuing tax credit certificates if they had not first adopted regulations concerning the credit, and instead would require the unit to report to Budget and Taxation Committee and the Committee on Ways and Means on actions that it's taking or has taken to implement the credit instead.
So the intention of that original provision is just to make sure that we're getting full information from the various departments on how they're implementing this alternative, gets at the same thing, but without potentially holding up the distribution of credits.
Is it fair to say that sort of the gist of this is to broaden the type of tax policies, tax actions that can be evaluated and are sort of subject to more searching review? Because I think I've been on the joint tax credit evaluation thing, and really it just seems like you get one particular program, you get a report. The reports are very well done. Delegate Blankovich reads them far closer than what I do. They're extremely dense, and they seem to sort of just regurgitate themselves every 3, 4, 5 years. Is the goal of this to sort of say we're going to have a more ecumenical look at tax policy and allow members of these committees to participate in that year long to sort of say, hey, we want to look at what is the dynamic effect of this credit or what is the negative effect of that policy, things to that effect.
I think that's one goal of the bill, is to expand the scope of our tax credit or tax evaluation process, tax expenditure evaluation process a little bit. Also to allow more flexibility in DLS. DLS has had some, we're asking a lot of them with some of these reports, and so we're limiting a little bit. We're focusing them more on the tax expenditures that have bigger fiscal impacts in the bill. But yes, that's part of what we're doing here.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
To me, this amendment seems a lot weaker than what was originally in the bill. I'm wondering if anyone can provide some more genesis of why this was brought forward. I actually prefer what's originally in the bill to the amendment.
And I believe, George, the request for the amendment came from Commerce, or?
Department of Commerce, since informational testimony raised concerns that this would result in delays with administration and providing credits to eligible applicants. They've indicated that although sometimes a regulation may not be immediately promulgated, that they do have interdisciplinary teams that meet as soon as these new credits are enacted, that those teams work to develop FAQs and other guidance for applicants, that all of that information is put on their websites. And so this would require any agency that's administering a credit that has a fiscal impact greater than $5 million that's enacted after the effective date of the bill to provide a report, routine, to B&T and Ways and Means on the actions that they take to implement the credit.
Rhonda, I know you're with us. Did you want to add to that because it came from your informational testimony?
Sure, and I hope that I do this justice. Our Director of Tax Credits is on the call as well. What we explained to the chairwoman and to George is that quite often when these bills are passed, we don't know what we don't know. And so it's not until you get into dealing with the credit, dealing with applicants, understanding all of the unique scenarios whereby we can do informed, substantive regulations. Otherwise, we would just be issuing regulations that restate the statute. And there are a couple of our programs where the regs are that simple. It just restates the statute. But for something as complicated as, for example, more jobs for Marylanders, it took us a very long time to set that up, to deal with different types of businesses, different scenarios. Are they expanding? What are all the unique externalities that could happen? And so we are just now beginning to look at developing regs, substantive regs for that program.
Lagovich-Carr, does that answer your question, or you still have concern?
It does. I still prefer what's in the original bill better. I won't hold this up. I mean, if the committee adopts this amendment, I'll still be okay with it. Adopt the amendment.
I'll move the amendment.
Second.
Any discussion, further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. On the bill as amended, is there any discussion?
Move
Is there a
favorable.
motion?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Let's go to HB 1252, income tax credits for preceptors in areas with healthcare workforce shortages. We had two bills that were related, having to do with healthcare preceptors. Just for ease of workload, we figured we'd just roll everything into a single bill. So we're going to use 1252 as the vehicle for it. So the amendments that were drafted include stuff that was in the other bill, including the reduction in preceptorship hours. George, they also impact the sunsets on these bills, correct? And ask for additional information.
Yes, both bills proposed eliminating the sunsets on the preceptorship credits And with respect to the new preceptor credit for physician's assistants, there was no sunset on that credit.
So the amendments would set a sunset, and they would require the department to provide information about whether it is actually leading to additional preceptorships, right? So they're,
George, or so it's a 5-year sunset then on both pieces for the tax credit, is that right?
That's correct. It would extend the preceptor credits, the nurse practitioner and the physician preceptors by 5 years. And then it would put a new sunset on the physician assistant preceptor tax credit of 5 years. So all would be aligned as far as their termination dates.
further questions on the bill or the amendments? All right, I move the amendments.
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the bill as amended, are there any questions or is there a motion?
Move favorable.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Last week, we held over HB 13, which is the bill that with neutrality of collective bargaining and anti consultants. As you'll recall, the Appropriations Committee on this bill, we are secondary. The Appropriations Committee made the decision to remove the income tax addition modification, which I will be bringing back for bill next year, but maintains the language prohibiting the use of public funds being used either to promote or discourage unionization of employees. And Delegate Buckle, you had some questions last week, so we held it over. Do you still have questions?
Well, my understanding is certainly what you just explained, it's been reduced down to something that is much more palatable, I think, from our perspective. My understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think that several of the Appropriations Committee Republicans also still voted against it simply
Yes.
of we shouldn't be, I don't know if this is the right word, micromanaging what the university system, wants to do or feels is in their best interest to do in terms of utilization. So on that basis and that basis alone, I appreciate the intent. I don't think it's a difficult bill per se. I suspect myself and probably Delegate Long will vote against it, but I don't think we're concerned about it enough to try to work it from the other angle.
Okay.
Now, next year's bill, we're going to be against that one.
That's fine. I'll fight you on it.
I know.
Is there further debate or discussion? All right, I believe George, correct me if I'm wrong, because the Appropriations Committee amended it, we have to adopt the amendments as well.
Correct.
So, Delegate
You
Buckle,
vote to gut your own bill. This is beautiful.
you can make the motion.
Oh.
All right, I move the amendments.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, on the amendment.
Any opposed? All right, on the bill as amended, move favorable.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, no.
No.
All right, Delegate Buckle and Delegate Long are opposed. All right, HB 278, Economic Development Job Creation Tax Credit Qualified Position. Delegate Feldmark, I know, has been working on some amendments to the bill, so I'm going to turn it over to Delegate Feldmark to explain those amendments.
Sure, thank you. So I think you have the amendment that George provided this morning. It basically makes two main changes. One is to address the issue that Delegate Buckle had raised in the hearing and looking at sort of the geographic diversity and economic diversity of the state. We are adding tier 1 counties to the list of enhanced credits. The other change is in the list of criteria, there were a couple of criteria that were too subjective to be really effectively implemented by Commerce. So we are removing the reference to fair scheduling because that it's hard to assess what's fair, and in reality, what's considered fair scheduling changes for, is different for different types of positions in different industries. So we're simply removing that because we didn't have a clean way to quantify it. And regarding the employer provided health care, rather than saying affordable, we're actually providing a specific reference to tie that to a percentage of net take-home pay. So that makes it easier for Commerce to implement.
So the end result of these amendments would be more clarity in the definitions of what those requirements are, as well as expanding access to the enhanced credit to the entirety of Tier 1 counties.
Correct. So I will move the amendment.
Second.
Is there discussion on that amendment or questions?
I'm gonna support the amendment and say certainly on the record how much I appreciated Delegate Feldmark's work and communications with myself, and I'm sure others, to work the bill. I indicated, and that's my fault. One of my primary concerns, I think the amendments are great and are intelligent amendments that solve problems. Certainly support the amendments. One of my concerns that is my fault, and I know Rhonda is on the line, and probably it's unfair to ask her this in this setting. Which is very directly affected by some of this because of the differences in the types of jobs we try to attract or can attract, and our competition in neighboring states with very different minimum wage requirements. I've had concern expressed by some of our local economic development authorities that they have some potential RFPs, negotiations in process to try to land companies that probably don't pay 150% of the state's minimum wage, or will not pay that within the next couple of years when the state's minimum wage reaches $15 an hour. And so I'm hopeful. I don't want to hold the bill up anymore because Jessica's been very gracious about working with us. But I'm hopeful maybe that I can communicate with Commerce, and at some point in time in the long and winding road of legislation before final language is there, maybe we can get something put in here that says for credits that are in the process, either an application has been received, and I'll leave that up to Commerce to define when they consider those offers to vest, so that those active ongoing efforts would not be impacted by the change in the criterion. That's kind of, I guess, my only comment. But on the amendments themselves, I think the amendments are a wonderful idea, and I support the amendments.
Let's go ahead and adopt these amendments, and let's turn to Rhonda and talk about this issue a little bit. So on the amendments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So Rhonda, can you tell us how would this work? The changes to this bill would be effective, what's the effective date, July 1?
I don't know if it's July or October.
Effective date is July 1, 2021, and it applies to taxable years 21 forward.
Okay. So Rhonda, if there are credit applications already in process, how would that be dealt with?
And I believe our tax credit directors is still on the call.
Sure.
Lonnie, hate to put you on the spot, but if you can unmute yourself and speak to that, because you know the process far better than I do with pre-certification and final certification.
Hi, so the definition of a qualified position, were that to change with either the minimum wage or any other requirements that would be attached to it, the position has to remain a qualified position for the year it's being certified. So when a job has been filled for 12 months, that's the year, that's the credit year. And that credit year, that position has to make the minimum wage and anything else that may be attached to it, whether it's fair scheduling or the like, has to also be with that job. There is also with JCTC a 3-year recap window. So the employer has to hold the job for the remainder of the 3 years. And for each one of those 3 years, the position has to remain a qualified position. So the minimum wage grows with it, and any other requirement that's attached has to stay with that position. So if you have an existing business now that's asking for the tax credit and they would be certified as in all their jobs were filled for 12 months, say in 2020, then the 2020 minimum wage, 120%, would attach to that position. But in order for them to stay within the recapture period, they would have to grow with the minimum wage. And if their one qualified position doesn't meet the minimum wage at the time, then that position would fall out of the program, and that tax credit could be recaptured.
So with respect to Delegate Buckles' question, I think what he's looking for is those businesses that have maybe submitted their letter of intent, that have one foot in the process, if there's a way that they can be grandfathered in, and not trying to speak for you, Delegate Buckle,
No, that's
but I
right.
understand what you're saying. And one of the concerns we had with this bill last year when it was introduced is areas like yours, where you are competing with Pennsylvania, West Virginia, nearby regions for business attraction deals. And so, for some areas of the state, this is not a problem, but for regions like Western Maryland, this can speak to competitiveness.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, if I understand what Lonnie said, and she certainly gave a good explanation. I had a little Zoom glitch, I think, maybe in part of it. That's my problem, I guess, with the bill. I appreciate and the bill sponsor's a great friend, and it's a well-intentioned idea. But what I think I just heard is that for my region, even if these folks get their applications in this year, they cut a deal. If they do their due diligence correctly, which certainly we wouldn't want to lead them astray and have them be hurt if they feel like, well, we were going to qualify, now you tell us a year from now we're not. They're going to find out that they're going to have to dramatically change their pay scales in order to keep the credit, because it seems to, from what you just said, it seems to be a rolling factor that you have to have it every year for those 3 years, and you have to meet the exact criterion of the bill for all of the positions during the entire recapture or look back or implementation period, whatever adjective you use. And so that's why I would ultimately probably not be able to support the bill, although I really appreciate the amendments that make it a little bit more palatable, that maybe give us an opportunity to make a little bit sweeter of an offer because the credits are higher to incentivize those higher paid jobs. But I do think that there is a real possibility that this will have a net deleterious effect on our ability to bring in certain types of, for our area, middle-class jobs. I wish that wasn't true, but it is true. For our area, making $40,000, $45,000 a year is, particularly if a two-income family making $75,000, $80,000 a year, is certainly viewed as middle class.
Delegate Feldmark, you have any thoughts?
I guess a question for Commerce. Are you able to tell us of the current recipients? How many qualified positions are in the program right now? And of those, how many fall between 120% and 150% of minimum wage?
That's a good question.
We'd have to do further research to get you those figures. The pool of companies in what you're looking for would be companies that had been certified for the past. So the credit has a 5-year carry forward, and there's a 3-year retention window. So we're basically looking at the last 5 years worth of applicants and their qualified positions to know those numbers, and we'd have to research it.
So I'm sorry, it's a 3-year retention period for the position.
Right.
Correct.
But the credit lasts for 5 years.
5 year,
right?
Yes, a carry forward if they don't use it fully in the first couple of years.
Right, just if it exceeds their tax liability, it can roll forward. Is that right?
Correct.
So, so it's really just a 3-year period that we'd have to look at, correct?
So that's the recapture window of tax credits that have to be paid back to the state. But the ability to take the credit would rely on the company maintaining the qualified positions.
You're muted, Delegate Feldmark.
Sorry. So a qualified position has to be retained for 3 years to avoid having to pay back the credit. But if the credit rolls forward, then that qualified position has to be retained through the carry forward also. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay.
I can clarify with our AGs for you. I don't think a question that's ever been posed to me, and I'm fairly new at the game.
I mean, I do understand the concern about folks who applied for and received a credit. At the same time, I still have the concern about using subsidized positions that aren't paying a living wage. And if they're in that narrow window between 120% and 150%, I think that's, but I mean, I think it would help to know what that number is. I don't really want to delay this, but I'll, I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, Delegate, I'm happy to take my lead from you. I mean, we could move forward with the bill now. We could wait until we're going to meet probably multiple times next week, and there's plenty of time left before crossover. So
yeah, I mean, I'm willing to hold it to get that data and see what the impact would be.
Okay. Well, why don't we do that then, and early next week we'll see if we can get it moving. So great. We are up against our 9:45 hard stop. All things considered, I think we did pretty well. We got some more complicated bills now we're dealing with. So we will, as I just said, we're gonna hold the remaining bills till next week, and likely meet at least twice next week to work through the remaining bills from today and some additional issues. So one, for your hard work, and thank you, Lonnie and Rhonda, for coming and participating in the conversations. Any final questions or comments for the good of the order? All right, we'll see everyone on the floor. Have a good one.